Hello, this is where my story begins. Hollybrook Homes in Southampton, children's home that was on an estate, 12 houses with 12 children in each house. And I lived up there. That was my bedroom. Now, of course, it's been turned into apartments and it's somebody's home. And I hope it's a happy place for them. It certainly wasn't for me. I can look back at it now dispassionately, but this was a place of horror for me. And I spent most of my childhood here. Let's go back to my house and I'll tell you the rest of the story. And this is my home. Come on in. Let's just continue to talk in here. I've lived here for 45 years, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful place to live. My home. This is where I have lived these past 45 years. It's where we brought up our children. It's been a great blessing to us. Yes, I've been here since lockdown. In my studio, I'm able to continue teaching and preaching in Ukraine, and actually to a much wider audience as well. So let me continue the story. My father died when I was just a year old, and my mother had only 5 days before that given birth to my sister Doreen. I was the youngest of 4 boys. The war was still on. It was 1942. No social services, so you can imagine the difficulty that must have been for my mother. I was put into Hollybrook Homes along with my brother Michael, and life there was very difficult. I won't say too much about it, but suffice to say I was 8 years old before I even knew I had a mother. Nobody thought that was important enough to tell me, but on my 8th birthday I had a card just signed "Love Mum," no other words, and that was a devastating reality for me. I remember sitting under an old beech tree and crying my eyes out that day. It wasn't long after that I got into my first bout of trouble. I went to a friend's house simply to wait for him, but while I was there I stole some things, and that night when it came to evening inspection, when the house mistress held my trousers up in front of my nose because I hadn't folded them properly, she shook them and out of the pockets fell these rings. I was treated to 6 of the best across my rear end, but that was a treatment that I was well used to. Unfortunately, the house father was somewhat of a sadist. And throughout my childhood, I was constantly in trouble with the police, going up in front of juvenile court, and usually I'd hear words like, "If you do this again, we'll send you away." I used to think that would be a wonderful idea. I'd love to be sent away, but I never was. At the age of 15, I had to leave school. That was school leaving age in those days. And I joined the army, thinking at least I would be fed and clothed. But after 9 months, I stole some post office savings books, and in trying to get money out of those savings accounts, I was caught. So I was kicked out of the army. I now landed on the streets of Southampton, homeless, and at the age of 18, my mates decided it'd be great for me to have a birthday party, and so I broke into 22 houses that day in order to steal enough money to have this party. But there we are, fencing a camera. I was caught by a policeman by the name of Brown, who I knew already, and in fact he became a Christian, and later on in life we became friends. But as I had no fixed address, they very kindly gave me one in Winchester Prison, and it was while I was there that I picked up a Gideon Bible that was left in my cell. I was not really a reading kind of a person. I have dyslexia, and so it was a difficult process for me. But I did get into the Bible, difficult as the language was with the Old English. And I was fascinated by Jesus. I was fascinated in the first place, rather like me, he was homeless. The Bible says that foxes have their holes and the birds of the air have their nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And I thought, he's just like me. And he had a gang he called his disciples, and he loved to argue with authority, which was something that I was very familiar with. But the fascinating thing for me was when I read that you could be born again. I thought that would be a wonderful idea. I'd made such a mess of it first time around. And as I read on and saw some of these wonderful truths, like the old things have passed away, and that you can be a new person. And I really wanted to be a different person. I found myself on my knees, crying my eyes out and praying to God that he would take my life and change it. I remember the prayer that I prayed. In fact, I said, God, if you're there, you've got 10 days to change my life. And if you ain't done it by then, you've copped it. Well, I never counted the days. I did know that something had happened, but I wasn't sure what. I rang the bell inside the cell door. And warden came up. He said, what do you want? I said, I'd like to see a chaplain. He says, what on earth do you want to see a chaplain for? I said, I don't know. I said, I think I've just become a Christian. Oh, he says, it's the Methodist you want. Well, the Methodist came up the next day, but frankly was not very helpful. His solution to my conversion was to send me the Methodist recorder, which frankly I didn't find as interesting as the Bible, so I got back to reading the Bible. I was sentenced to spend a year in London at a place called McGregor House. It was a probation hostel. It meant that you could go out to work during the day, but you had to be there once you came in from work. But on Sundays, we were free. So I decided to go to church. And my first experience of church, frankly, could have been disastrous because when I got inside the church, everything was just so foreign to me. But on the way out, the minister stopped me and said, hello, what's your name? I said, Vic. He says, where are you from, Vic? I said, the probation hostel up the road. Oh, he says, that's nice. Well, it might be for you, mate. I got to live there. He said, look, would you like to come to my place for tea this afternoon? And I thought, he's bent. Because when you live on the street, there's only one kind of person that invites you home. But he said, look, I've got 4 daughters and they'd love to meet you. Well, you know, that caught me. I went along and, you know, this man was fascinating. Sat there puffing on his pipe. His shoes had been kicked off. But he talked in the most natural way about Jesus. And I was hooked. Very soon after that, I started going to a prayer meeting on a Saturday morning. And after one of these prayer meetings, a guy called Tony State said to me, "Come on, Jackopson, grab a chair." So I dutifully grabbed a chair because he seemed to have plenty of authority. And off we marched to the end of Chatsworth Way, to the corner of the High Street. And he stood on the chair and started to preach, and got quite a crowd, because in those days you could be heard. There weren't so many cars on the road. And when he'd finished, he just slapped me on the back. He said, "Now get up there and you tell them about Jesus." Well, of course, I had no preparation. I had really any idea what to say. But I got up on the chair, and I remembered that there was an advert about Daz that washed things whiter than snow. And I had that morning read in the Bible about if your sins are as scarlet, they should be as white as wool. And so I started by asking the question, do you know how white wool can get? And I told them how he had washed my sins and given me salvation. And I was amazed that people actually stood there and listened. So I was hooked. A little while after that, I think about 2 weeks after that, I was baptized. And I remember as I was going down under the water, the words of the song that the congregation were singing, "I am trusting thee for power, thine can never fail. Words which thou thyself shalt give me must prevail." And that actually has been the story of my life, because God called me to be a preacher. I've been preaching now for more than 60 years, and I've seen thousands of people come to Christ. First of all, I was in pastoral ministry. After 4 years at Spurgeon's College, training for the ministry, I spent 8 years in pastoral ministry alongside my dear wife, Sue. Was there that we started our family with our daughters, Christy and Ruth. And then I was invited to become the national director for Evangelism Explosion. And after doing that for a while, I was asked to become the vice president of the international organisation with responsibility for all of Europe, both sides of the Iron Curtain as it was then. It was in 1985 that my wife and I left Evangelism Explosion and set up Hope Now, which we served for 25 years until poor health caused retirement. I continued to work in Ukraine, which is where I had worked for many years already, but sadly my wife got Alzheimer's, and so for 4 years the focus of my attention was obviously on my dear Sue, until she died 3 years ago, right here on the very spot where I'm talking to you today. I handed her over into the arms of the Lord she loved so well. Since then, I've got back to work in Ukraine, continued working with the prisoners in Prison 62, where we've seen so many men not only become Christians, but go on into ministry. Even the prison governor became a Christian, along with his whole family, and I had the joy of baptizing him in the River Dnieper. God had us working with orphans and rescuing homeless children. 2 of those children, 2 boys, became our sons. And of course they are today grown with their own families. And God has seen fit to bless my life in so many ways. Well, as you can see, I'm an old man now, with much to be thankful for. But the end is not yet. It will come one day, and then I'll make that journey, and we will see that God is faithful. How thankful I am for the Gideons, and for one person who put a Bible in that cell. The investment that he made, I believe, was so worthwhile.